if I was just to give you an absolute value, you guys, a very simple and basic one, you guys should have no problem, right? What is the absolute value of 3 equal to?
3.
And what's the absolute value of negative 3 equal to? 3. Okay, so you guys know how to apply these. So as far as manipulating simple absolute values, you guys should have no problem with that. Okay, the one thing that I want to kind of expand on this is to actually go through and define it in the most general terms. So if you take the absolute value of some number, some real number a, it can have one of two forms, and we see it right here. And those forms depend on whether the expression inside the absolute value is positive, or sorry, is negative or non-negative. So if it's negative, so if a is less than 0, hey, what did we see has to happen? We take the expression inside the absolute value and do what to it? We change the sign, right? Changing the sign, we just multiply it by -1. Okay, so the absolute value of a is equal to negative a if it was a negative value inside. Okay, but what happens if it's a non-negative, meaning it's greater than or equal to 0? Then a is this absolute value of a is just equal to itself, a. Okay, so this is the definition, the mathematical definition of absolute value. Okay, in dealing with single-term numbers or expressions, there's really not that much of an issue with absolute values. So let's take, for instance, the sample problem number 9. All right, so if I ask you to evaluate these absolute values, and answer the questions. Are these statements true or false? And I want you just to take about a minute and see if you can do that by hand. You don't need to use a calculator on this. And can you use the rules for absolute value to solve these? All right, so let's take a look at this sample problem. So if we look at A, okay, take the absolute value of -3, fits this lower case, so we take its opposite, which is 3, plus 6 minus 5 has a value of 1, absolute value of 1 fits the top case, it's just itself 1. And we want to check and see, is it true that that is less than or equal to minus times a minus? When you subtract, it's like adding the opposite, so we add the opposite, change the sign to a 4. So is this a true statement? Yeah, 4 is less than or equal to 4 because it is equal to it. Okay, so that's a true statement. All right, I'm going to have to stop projecting. All right, if we move to B. Okay, in looking at B here, again, same idea. 14 plus a -2 is 12. Absolute value of 12 is 12. Minus absolute value of -16 is 16. And so you can check to see, is it true that 12 minus 16 is equal to 28? No, so that's false. Move on to C. For C here, we subtract a negative, which is equivalent to adding the opposite. So we get -6 plus 3, which is -3. Absolute value of -3 is a positive 3. And we want to check and see, is that greater than or equal to absolute value of -4, which is a 4, and the answer is no. So that's a false. And then the final portion, or the final example, subtracting a negative is equivalent to adding the opposite. So we get 16 plus 4, which is 20 in absolute values. Absolute value of 20 is just itself 20, minus 3 minus 5 is a -2. Absolute value of -2 is 2. And so we test to see, is that equivalent to, or is that greater than or equal to 12? 18 is, and so we get a true for that final statement.